And let's go ahead and launch. Hi, Armando Roman with the Founders Guidepost here today with Dan Tyre. Dan, how are you?
I am off the charts great, Armando, and
Fan-
very excited to be here today. And where you're going to
Fantastic.
do everything you can to keep me to 60 minutes, which is hard, right? That's your task today, right? But we're going to be concise. We're going to give a lot of founder wisdom, right? I'm happy to share my story and with your listeners and have a fun time.
Fantastic. So, Dan, our listeners are people who have had one company. They will typically have one exit in their lives. They founded a company. They've made themselves into, the American success story, self-made multimillionaires, and they've got this business now, and they've got to do something with it, which typically sell, transition, somehow exit. You've had the good fortune of being through several exits, two unicorns, HubSpot being one of them. And what we want to talk about today is I'd like you to share as much wisdom as you can with the founders so they can learn from your experience. And with any luck, copy your success, emulate your success, and have that exit story that we're all excited to talk about. So I've got a question for you. You've been through several exits, Dan, and again, two unicorns. In the big picture, what can you share with the founder who wants to be where you are today?
Oh, everybody says, I want to be just like you, Tyre. Although they have to ask my beautiful wife, Amy, who I've been married for 47 years, because I'm not sure she would agree. It's just that I'm a little bit more senior than many of today's entrepreneurs. But there's three things that are very important. Number one, be intentional in what you want to do. Right. And I know a lot of your founders, and I'm a huge Armando fan because you want to be inspiring to these founders, right? And starting a
Exactly.
podcast and talking about inspiring people to follow the right path, right, is like really important. And what I found is one of the secrets of life is if you're intentional about what you want to do, right? That is, you think it through. A lot of people just go off half cocked. A lot of people just are quick
Yep.
starters. A lot of people don't really think through. Okay. Especially when you start a company, right? The range of reasons for starting a company is all over the place. People, oh, I
Right.
did it because I got fired. I did it because I wanted to feed my family. Did it because I got ticked off at my old boss. There's a variety of different reasons.
Right.
But right, sitting down and saying, all right, one of the tire wisdom things I always say, it takes 8 years to build a company. Many of your founders in established businesses takes a lot longer,
Right.
right? But you want to think about what you want to do, what you're trying to accomplish. The second thing is I want you to write it out. Lots of people, I'm a big goal setter, been a goal setter for 40 years, and it's helped me
Okay.
achieve a lot of my personal and professional goals. If you don't write it down, it's not really a goal, it's just a dream. If you write it
Okay.
out, and then you're going to update it on a periodic basis. You're going to review it. You're going to say, I'm working towards this goal. It could be a financial goal, it could be a business goal, it could be a spiritual goal, it could be an education goal, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
And then all your founders, they already know they're going to work their butt off to get there,
That's
right?
right.
And it's hard, Armando, to explain to people. I think it's a little easier in the AI age, but that build a great company takes 8 years, but it's every waking minute, right? You pretty much hand your kids to your wife or your partner and say,
Right.
I will see you in 8 years.
Right.
Because in today's world, things move very, very quickly, right? You, and many times, have one shot, right? Unless you're
Exactly.
a successful entrepreneur, like working your butt off and making sure that you're focusing on the priorities, making sure that you're working on the things that are essential for scale and to build a solid, profitable company. And once you've got cash flow positive, or that you have the economies of scale, you have some level of customer retention, and you've figured out the best way to get the best customers, then it gets a little bit easier. And at that point in time, you can have a lifestyle company. But to get to that point usually takes an extraordinary effort, which is why most folks fail to get there.
Yep. Yep, exactly, exactly. So one of the, I think most people have probably heard of HubSpot, maybe not quite know what it is. But Dan, how about if you talk about that a little bit? You were employee number 6, is that right?
That's right. So HubSpot is the crowning jewel on my 46-year entrepreneurial history. In Went to Colgate University in 1976. I sold books door to door to work my way through university. I was a bass player in a heavy metal rock and roll band when I graduated, which was amazing. It didn't pay a lot, but had a lot of fringe benefits. And then I started my entrepreneur career at a company called the Computer Store, which was the worst run company in American business, right? They should listen to your podcast. I'm going to send it to everybody who's associated. The Computer Store had two locations, Framingham and Boston, and they had an exclusive to sell Apple computers east of the Mississippi, and they found
Wow.
a way to screw that up. Right? They
Wow.
had leadership problems, nepotism problems, all the stuff you talk on your podcast, Armando. They
Wow.
didn't have good documentation. They had problems with shipping. They had no
Oh,
real chain of command. They didn't have good documentation. Accounting was all over the place. Inventory was crazy. And but I knew how to sell, and I worked for this guy Roger. And Roger was the best boss ever. He was this jolly guy from Wisconsin. He was a band leader, and I never heard him swear. And he got through all of this craziness. And after 11 months, he came in one day and he said, "I'm quitting." I'm like, "You're quitting?" He's like, "Yes, I'm going to a startup." And I'm like, "What's a startup?" He's like, "It's a small company that's going to grow very quickly." I'm like, "All right, well, knock yourself out." He's like, "No, no, no, no. I want to take you with me." I'm like, "I already got a job." He's like, "I'll give you $74, $75 more a month." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a startup guy." So I left this company called the Computer Store. I went to this company called Businessland. And Businessland was $100,000 of revenue, and they had like five locations in 1982. And over the next 9 years, grew to $1.4 billion
holy
and
smokes.
IPO'd. And I worked in downtown Boston, then I worked in Back Bay, then I worked in Framingham, then I worked in LA, San Francisco, and then New York. And it was an introduction to these fast growing companies that was amazing. And I got addicted to growing very quickly. I was a go to market guy. It was the 80s and 90s when people were buying a lot of PCs and networks. I was able to, it was really a good timing and a good company. And they had all of the like scaling infrastructure that was necessary to grow. After almost a decade there, I quit and started my own company.
Okay.
And I decided I wanted to see if I could be a good founder and CEO, and started a company in my dining room with $40,000 and scaled it to $15 million of revenue. Sold it to a Phoenix-based company. That's how I got to Arizona in 1997. The
Oh,
combined
fantastic.
companies, $50 million. It was a small privately held company, but we raised $30 million. We were experts in consulting, training, and building applications and collaboration software. And it was my first founding position where I was responsible for both the scale, and the combined company was EVP of, I think, marketing, sales, and grew it to, I think it was 300 people and
Okay.
$15 million. And then I bought their training division as the third, my third startup, and that was super
Okay.
fun. Then my fourth startup got bought up by Microsoft, and my boss there was this guy, Jim Wilson, and Jim reported to Brian Halligan. And because I covered a territory between LA and Arkansas, I worked directly with Halligan for a variety of different deals. Then when Groove Networks got sold to Microsoft, right? Brian went to MIT and met Darbesh. I stayed at Microsoft for a year, which was a blast, covering a wide territory. And then when they started HubSpot, Brian called me and he said, "You're a good startup guy." And I'm like, "You're right." He's like, "I want you to come work for me." I'm like, "I've already made a commitment to one of my buddies to be president of the software company." He's like, "You're making a big mistake." I'm like, "Are you going to start the company in Phoenix?" He's like, "No, I'm starting it in Cambridge." I'm like, "I have two kids. My wife will kill me. I can't be in Cambridge all the time." He's like, "You're making a huge mistake." And I'm like, "Okay, maybe, but we'll see what happens." It's pretty funny. About 6 months later, he calls me up and he's like, "We pivoted." I'm like, "What do you mean you pivoted?" We got a new business model. I'm like, "Okay, good for you." He's like, "Do you need leads from your website?" I'm like, "Yeah, I pay Google for leads from my website." He's like, "Do you want leads without paying Google?" I'm like, "What?" Everybody wants that. Who doesn't want that? He's like,
Yeah.
"As long as you'll do this and use HubSpot software, then we can get you leads from the website." And I'm like, "All right, how much does it cost?" He's like, $500. And I'm like, "All right, I'll give you $250 a month for it." He's like, "You're in." So I became HubSpot's third customer. Helm Software was HubSpot's third customer, right? And it was amazing. It was a little early stage. It was beta software, right? And Dharmesh, the other co-founder, was my customer success person, and there were issues that sometimes it went sideways. But this was 2006, and then in 2007 we sold that company. I called Brian. I'm like, "Can I use your network to find my next adventure?" And he's like, "No, you're coming to work for me." I'm like, I can only be in Boston 1 week out of the month. He goes, it's 2007. We'll figure it out. So I'm like, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, I want you to cold call. I'm like, you want me to go from being president of a software company to cold calling? He's like, yep. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. And I joined as employee number 6. And it was amazing. I was there for 17 years. I started as the first salesperson, the first sales manager, the first sales director. I ran the international division. I did sales hiring. I did sales enablement before Andrew Quinn. I worked for this guy, Mark Roberge, which is funny because he's a great entrepreneur. He was at HubSpot for 10 years and then went to be entrepreneur in residence at Harvard Business School.
Hmm.
And I work for him again now. He runs Stage 2 Capital, where I'm an operating partner.
Okay.
And he is the smartest, most thoughtful go-to-market guy. He was amazing. He was 27 at the time. And I went to work for him. We had one argument in 7 years. He was the guy who strategized about how the companies scale. And it was amazing growth. We went from zero to $2.5 billion over that 17
Wow.
years. And at
Wow.
every stage, right, the advice that I give to you, will share with your founders, is what gets you to a $500,000 works against you to get $1 million. What gets you to $1 million, and you know this because you work with founders all the time,
Yeah.
the ability to understand when to scale and how to hire that management level and how you focus on the right things, the right priorities are critically important. And it's very, very hard. It's a little bit different in every industry, right? But what makes a good founder is somebody who is a chameleon, who can have good skills at one level and also understand what the keys are at the next level, because what gets you there, if you work as hard as you can, like we were talking about, and get to $500,000, if you try to duplicate that to get to $1 million, you'll burn out,
Yeah.
which is a good example we hear all the time.
Right.
What
Right.
you have to be open, aware. For Tyre Angel, we like to ensure that you have 3 good advisors to your company, right?
Okay.
People from the outside who can look at you, who can focus on what you're doing and can see the bigger picture so you don't get
Okay.
sucked into the abyss.
Okay.
Anyway, HubSpot was amazing for a variety of different reasons. Number one, amazing innovation, right? In 2007, no one knew that you could trick out your website to get leads that people would drop on a form on your website. It just didn't happen. And the inbound process, which was Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah, the co-founders of HubSpot, was truly innovative. The second thing that was amazing about HubSpot is the team, right? And being the first 10 employees were all MIT Sloan School grads. So I was
Wow.
the only guy who didn't have a advanced degree. And they
Wow.
were all like very, very smart. They were all very, very driven. And one of the things that propelled HubSpot and HubSpot's growth is the team concept of only hiring the best people. For many, many years, it was harder to get into HubSpot than MIT or Harvard statistically, right? And
Wow.
Katie Burke and the early recruiters had such a great way of picking only the best people. And it was a competitive job market in at Cambridge in 2007 to 2012. And we didn't have a lot of money. So many times you were hiring people, especially in go-to-market, that were right out of college. And but the team of folks, if you made it into HubSpot, at one point in time, and when I give the presentation on scaling in the modern era, we talk about 2 things. We talk about culture and we talk about growth. And for
Okay.
the team component, the culture component, Katie Burke, who's now the COO at Harvey, an AI company in the legal industry, had fashioned this thing called HEART. And it was an acronym of the attributes we were looking for in early stage employees. And H stood for humble. And
Okay.
all of the founders out there who've ever worked with an egotistical partner or founder, humble is like critically important, right? You have to have people who are well grounded and are not going to spout off about stupid stuff. E was and originally effing effective, right? Which means there were people who get stuff done, right? Which, as you know, is very important in the scale
Yep.
up. A was adaptable. And that was such a good one because your job would change all the time.
Yeah.
The best thing that I ever learned at HubSpot wasn't actually the HubSpot technology or the process of growth or any of that. It was that you have to be a learn-it-all. You have to evaluate what's going on. You have to understand what's going on in the industry because it was moving so quick. And now in 2026, it moves even quicker,
Hmm.
right? So that adaptable in the HEART acronym was very important. And then R was remarkable. We only hired remarkable people. I don't care if
Okay.
you were a violin player, a lacrosse player. I don't care if you like hiked across Australia. You had to have done something remarkable.
Okay.
And then T was transparent, right? And all the way up to the IPO, everybody at HubSpot was considered an insider to the receptions, right? Everybody had all of the access to the information, right, at all times, which was a great way to get everybody
Hmm.
ownership in the company and the scale.
Okay.
So we
Okay.
had innovative, we had team, and then the third part was traction. And my buddy Mark, who was the CRO and the architect of the scale, right? He figured it out, and he was the best vice president of sales or CRO I'd ever met because he was an engineer, right? And he looked at sales not like normal sales. He looked at it like an algorithm. And he figured it out who to hire, when to hire, how to teach them, what their quota should be, how to, all of these different things. And
Okay.
HubSpot went 37 months from zero revenue to the 38th month. Was the first time we didn't hit our number. We had a monthly number, a number of hiring people and customers and revenue. Went
Okay.
37 and 0, and that allowed us to raise $110 million so that
Wow.
we could scale to a public company.
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like you had 18 players, and that was a critical part of how you were able to grow and manage that growth.
Always, right? Number one, and when we do our investment with Tyre Angel, or as we look at stage two, we're always looking for founders. We're looking for grit. We're looking for smarts. We're looking for
Okay.
industry understanding. And then we're also in the AI age, we're looking for what is your special sauce today? And you're going to be able to follow direction as you scale. To my earlier point, right? Getting to $1 million is just the starting point, right? Getting to $10 million, it changes completely to get to $20 million. You
Hmm.
have to have experts in all these different areas. You have to have a good CPA because at $10 million, right, there's going to be all these curveballs that you've never
Right.
faced before. And the
Right.
essence of being an entrepreneur, you know this, Armando, you
Right.
get punched in the face all the time,
Right.
right? Anybody who's delusional enough to start a company, especially today, because there's so much competition. It's easier, but also harder than ever to start a company, right? And so in the early stage, you got to do everything. I was just talking to a Ukraine startup where he's raised a small amount of money. He's like, Dan, I am working 80 hours a week. I am negotiating three contracts. I have 4 months of runway. I have to stay focused. I'm like, okay, you're right. That's exactly what you need to do. But as soon as you raise that round, you need to hire a fractional lawyer so that they can negotiate the contract. And that's very, very hard for many entrepreneurs because they've always done it themselves,
Yeah.
right? They want to maintain control. But when you hit that certain level, you got to be smart enough to say, okay, this is no longer my bailiwick. I'm going to hand it over to somebody else. We're going to plan out the next stage of our progress. We're going to work with CPAs, with tax accountants, with legal folks, and building those relationships. One of the things I tell everybody is every business is a people business. I don't care if you're selling fencing or technology or services or when you and I met, it was a mining discussion,
Yeah.
right? Of these
Yeah.
people who are every business is a people business, and you got to be able to read those people. You got to be able to inspire and motivate those people. You have to understand, and if you can leverage, Mark Cuban just came out with I think it was an article that said one of the most important things for wealth transfer is to make people owners in companies. And I've always believed that's true from my first startup. I always like
Hmm.
to give everybody equity in the company, right? Even if it's phantom equity, if it's an LLC, because I wanted to make decisions every single minute like they were an owner of the company. And even if
Hmm.
they didn't, even if it wasn't a large amount, right? They were still in the circle of trust. We still shared the finances with them. We told them where we're doing great. We told them when we weren't doing great. We showed the share price on a annual basis, and we wanted to leverage their entrepreneurial instincts as the companies grew.
Wow. Yeah. And so your heart acronym HEART, that last part of the T is the transparency. And that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. Anybody's listening to the podcast, just Google HubSpot culture code, right? The backstory to this culture is so important, even at the small beginning. And the backstory is that Brian went to an offsite and sat with the CEO of iRobot, who makes the Roomba. Do you have a Roomba at home, Armando?
No,
One
no.
of those little things that goes around and
I've
scares the
seen
cat.
them.
I know, everybody has. And he sat next to Colin. I think his last name was Angle, and he was the entrepreneur. And Colin asked Brian, "What are you doing for your culture?" And Brian's like, "What?" He's like, "Your culture. How do you get people to come to your company and stay there?" And he's like, "I don't do anything for my culture." But he got him thinking, and he went back to Dharmesh and he said, "What do you know about culture?" And Dharmesh is like, "I don't know anything about culture." But Dharmesh is a researcher, right? Dharmesh is the Dalai Lama of technology. He's a great guy and a good friend, and taught me a lot about angel investing and scaling a company. And he went out and he researched it, and he came up with the HubSpot Culture Code, which include that acronym on heart. And
Okay.
when you Google it, you'll see there's 127 slides on the HubSpot culture code. And the way Dharmesh
Wow.
explained it was perfect. He's like, your product is for your customers. Your culture is your product for your employees. And I'm like, oh my God, that's brilliant. And
Wow.
then there were tons of people, Hannah Fleischman and then Katie Burke and all of these people who leaned into the culture. Culture is something that you pay up for, that you recognize. Katie was my first chief people officer. I had always had human resource people to tell me what I was doing wrong. She was the voice of the employee, and she was amazing at it and created this whole kind of ecosystem, including recruiting the right folks, getting them all to work together. Right. For the first 8 years at HubSpot, I think it was 8 years, we were all in the same essentially location. Everybody was in Cambridge, which means I
Wow.
was commuting 100% of the time for 10 years, which my wife wasn't too happy about.
Yeah, I'm sure.
My kids were 50-50. Sometimes my 9-year-old daughter would be like, "Dad, do you have to go out on the road
Right.
again?"
Yeah.
Sometimes she'd be like, "Dad, when are you going on the road again?" Which my wife could say, my 9-year-old daughter, that's a little bit out of bounds. Anyway, that culture is something to be mindful, especially in the AI age. It's a distinguishing factor as companies scale because the people who get the best employees will always win, right? But just getting them, you have to keep them, and then you have to get them to play well in the sandbox. And so, if you Google the HubSpot Culture Code, you'll see that. And over time, HubSpot was amazing at putting in leadership programs and managing the hybrid process, especially through COVID, understanding which roles had to be in person, which roles could be remote, understanding how to get the best employee. And now HubSpot sold in 122 countries, I
Wow.
think 6,000 employees. And the HubSpot culture code still exists, and the culture is an essential part of what Yamini Rangan, who is the CEO, implements on a regular basis. One other thing, they did something really brilliant. I think it started 5 years ago. They implemented the HubSpot Week of Rest, which is right after July 4th. The entire company shuts down. So you're
Wow.
not getting emails. You're not feeling bad while you're sitting on the beach. Because it's such a go-go environment, everybody relaxes. Everybody like unplugs. You're not supposed to send emails. You're not supposed to touch your PC until the
Hmm.
following Monday. And it's really a plus plus to recognize how important it is for the employee's family, and it's just a really good time where everybody can unplug.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. It sounds like the company just grew, as you said, phenomenally from, from zero to an extremely big number and in over 122 countries at this point. And that growth trajectory, it's hard for people, I'd say, to even imagine growing from a little group of 4, 5, 6 people to that many. And what you did in just a few minutes there, Dan, is you talked about how that happened with the culture, with the systems, with thinking ahead and the acronym to build that company culture that helped you achieve that growth, which is just truly phenomenal. And you've gone through several exits, Dan, along the way. So you've been fortunate, been blessed in a way that you've been able to experience that and see how that goes. Our founders are thinking to themselves about that one exit they're going to have and what that really is going to mean for them. And that weighs heavy on their mind. So often they're building a company, as you have, not scaling maybe as much as you have, but certainly building a company. And to them and their family, it's critical that the exit be successful. Having gone through the exits as you have, what would you say are the key components of a successful exit? What should they be thinking about, those founders?
Okay, so very good question. And the first thing is, it's always a difficult decision. It's kind of like a roller coaster on a windy day, right? Because you're like, there are plenty of times every single week you're like, I should sell and leave. And then there's other, I love this.
Right.
What
I'm
am I
done.
gonna do? I'm done. It's like an oscillation chart, right? And you have all these different feelings, and then you've been doing it for 12 years, and like, what am I going to do next? What are like, where am I going to hang out? Where am I going to go
Yeah.
to work? What am I going to do?
Yep.
Who are all my friends, all my social status, all the money that I got to make? But it's a natural part of business growth,
Yes.
right? And you were the person who said in the briefing meeting, you should always have a plan, right? And you should think through why you want to sell the company, right?
Yes.
And there's a variety of different reasons why. Number one, you can't stand it anymore. Right? After
Yep.
17 years at HubSpot, the best run company ever, I had it. I just could not do it anymore. So I was starting to get grumpy with employees, vendors, and customers. And if you're in that stage, and founders, you're listening to Armando and I, you know what I'm talking about.
That's right.
Right? And your wife knows what I'm talking about. You're just not as happy as you've been. You've been doing it for too long. It's time for your next adventure. Right. And so if you just can't stand it anymore, if you find you're getting sucked into the stress and difficulty,
Yeah.
then it
Sometimes
maybe
called burnout.
okay, very, very good, right? If you're in burnout, actually in burnout, right, you're probably past the time, right, when you should have considered something like that,
Right.
right? If you're approaching burnout, if it's just not as quite as fun as it was anymore. The other thing that I was thinking about is significant industry changes, which happens all the time, Armando,
Right.
and you know it, you
That's right.
see it, right? What worked in 2024 may not work in 2026.
Right.
And guess what? OpenAI is coming for your business. Anthropic and Oracle are going to be introducing new tools. And so those significant industry changes may erode the value of the business. So you got to be
Exactly.
smart and thoughtful. That may be a good indication of time to sell. And then sometimes for some of our Tyre Angel portfolio companies, people will offer us a what we view as an outside price for the valuation of the company. We had a company in April sell for 40 times revenues, which is 4x what they're usually valued at. And
Wow.
so we had to take a very close look at it. It was a relatively early stage company. It's only been around for 4 years, but
Wow.
that was a exit that number one would meet the founders' expectations from when they started. When they started, they are like, we want to build the company to this level. We want to sell it for this much. And because the offer was so extraordinary, that was the instigator for them moving a little bit more aggressively to take the acquisition offer.
Okay.
And with those three things, with your like you can't stand it anymore, industry changes, meet the financial goal that you started the company for, I think it's probably a good idea to kind of understand what the selling process is. And you don't sell a company, you do, but it takes a long time. Like
Right.
in your experience, how long does it take to do the entire process from deciding to sell to actually culminating the
Well, really
transaction?
2 to 5 years, if not 2 to 10 years, you want to begin that planning, the structure, and building it so that it is now a set of keys you can hand to the new owner and it just transitions seamlessly for maximum value. I mean, that's the goal, that's the dream. But the planning has to be 2 to 5 years, if not more like 10 years ahead of time, so that it really can hit those marks that you really want to hit.
I think that's right. And so 10 years, you write out the goals and what your 10-year, of course, they're going to change. And of course, they're going to be twists and turns, but you
Yeah.
got to know when you start.
Yeah.
I always say start with the goals and work backwards.
Yeah.
In year two, once you start hitting that sustenance break even kind of thing, then you want to do exactly what you talked about. You want to get all your documentation effective. You want to make sure that you're positioning yourself so you're not having to go back and redo all your balance sheets, income statements. You've got to make sure that you have the right technology in place so that you can scale. You want to make sure that you're positioned so that if you make the decision, you have the option to move into that selling sequence. And when I sold
Exactly.
ALI in 1997, it was a year, right? Which is kind of funny because the way we typically started any type of M&A activity is we would partner with somebody to understand whether we liked them or not, right? Because if you're going to work post sale, even if you're not going to work post sale, it's like being married. You're going to know these people for the rest of your life. So you might
Yep.
as well get aligned with
Yep.
them. They should have the right values. They should have the right morals. They should follow the same kind of rules that you do, accounting principles, all that. And it's sometimes hard to see that on just a couple of different,
Right.
especially M&A meetings,
But people
right?
you'd like to hang out with, people you would enjoy
Exactly.
hanging out with. Yes.
Exactly. And people who like have the same kind of intentions, the same type of philosophy, the
Yeah,
same type of that like that you would be proud to be associated with, the same type of
exactly.
morals, at the kind of thing. And then the actual process where you're like, okay, well, do you think we might want to combine in some fashion? Takes a year. And that's where, like, your CPAs, your tax attorneys, your wealth advisors, those people come in. And the earlier you can get them involved, right, as your team, right, you have your business team, you have your personal team, right, that all sitting around the table so that they're all watching like a hawk. It's a little expensive.
Right.
It's worth every penny, right? Because just like you said, I can't tell you the number of times you get right to the finish line and something's not right. And
Right.
there is difficulty in completing the transaction because I haven't followed the process that we're talking about.
Yep,
And so,
exactly.
and it's heartbreaking, right? You got your heart set on it. What people don't understand is selling a company is it's like starting a whole separate company. You got to run the company first, and then you've got to work on building those relationships, getting everything in order, understanding all of the details post merger or post acquisition. And there are a million of them. So you're going to put another 40 hours on top of the time that you're working now to exit the company. I just had a personal experience with somebody in my family who it was selling a company that spent 20 years building, and it took him 2 years. And the last 6 months, he's like, I was at a meeting like for half the day, every single day. And they're all very valuable meetings. Transaction was finally approved. He did all the right stuff. He lined up all of his documentation, had all his experts, was working specifically with the right folks,
Okay.
and ended up a highly successful transaction.
Fantastic. And that's what you want. You want that highly successful transaction and planning ahead of time. It's interesting what you said, Dan. You said that, you focus all this time to build that great company, which of course you have to. And I've had many, many, many investment bankers tell me that what the buyer wants is a company where the owner can leave and the company functions just fine without the owner. It just runs like a top and it produces cash. That's what the buyers want to buy. So all this effort to build that great company and then bring in that exit team, which would be the M&A attorney, the tax CPA, the wealth advisory, the investment banking, et cetera. So they work as a team, as your team, to help you successfully navigate that once in a lifetime exit, which is typical for most people. I mean, that once in a lifetime exit.
No, 100%. And it's worthwhile to spend a little extra time, effort, and money up front because there's lots of scenarios where we get to the end and everything, all the ducks aren't in a row, and
Right.
it's heartbreaking. And that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants to purchase a company that's profitable, that's growing, that has good relationship, good culture, has defined processes, and in the 10 to 20 million dollar range. If it's not written out and if it's not documented, it doesn't exist, right? And the reason why companies want to buy companies that have that kind of process is because it's less risky, right? And you can't be focused just on one entrepreneur, even if he's a dynamic and like incredible inventor or entrepreneur or growth guy or finance guy, because it's too risky of
Right.
irrational event that something could greatly reduce the value of the company.
Right, right. So as you think about, HubSpot, of course, is still an amazing company, and you were part of that whole. You added a lot of yourself to that growth trajectory that they had, and then the exit came along, and with the different exits that you've been through, Dan, are there are always surprises along the way, as you said, things happen, and you just have to adapt and adapt with it and handle it. But as you're going through exit, as you think about exit, for that founder who is thinking about exit, they're thinking, is it the right time? Do I have the right valuation? Have I done what I need to do now? What do I not know that I should know as I'm thinking about going through exit? And so before they actually pull the trigger, all those thoughts are on their mind, and it's a major decision, obviously, and financially, it's probably 90% of their overall net worth in this one company. So the stakes are very, very high. And you've
Yep.
gone through that successfully many times. Um,
Yep.
any other nuggets that we haven't touched on it to this point that you think are just critical for them?
Well, number one, understand that selling a company is accepting another job, right? It's going to be hard work. Number two, just like you said, you've never done it before, so there's things you got to learn. What I like is for every company that we invest in, they have at least three advisors. I like three,
Okay.
especially for the smaller company, because there can't be any ties. One
Okay.
of those three people, as you call it the exit team, right? One of those three people has to have a significant amount of experience in buying and selling companies because the
Okay.
minutia involved in this, from patents to innovation to non-competes to details to balance sheet to all that stuff. The reason why it takes a year is all of those documents need to be reviewed, verified, double checked, and um, it's hard for an entrepreneur to go through that, or a founder to go through all the level of detail, and we really don't want them to. We want a secondary advisor or somebody who is tangentially related to the company, understands the business model, but has the time, effort, and experience to make sure that they're dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. And it goes both ways. If you're being acquired, and unless it's all cash, you want to make sure that the acquiring company is at the same level of scrutiny that you have, right? So your team of partnership team has to have the same skills and access and walk through to make sure that the equity value of what you're receiving is commensurate with the price. It's a little easier today with AI to get valuations, right? There's lots of
Right.
information in the public domain about what companies would trade based on the industry they are, their growth rate, their
Right.
EBITDA, their revenue, their
Yep.
profitability, all those kind of stuff. And I think we do a pretty good job of coming to agreement on a range. The challenge is that founders always think their company is worth more, and an acquiring company always thinks it's less. But that's part of the personality kind of stuff, right? And like through the transaction process, there are going to be lots of twists and turns, and the ability for you to sit across the table and say, Armando, we're a little bit at odds here. How are we going to work this out? Right? Is everything's solvable. Right? Everything
Right.
can be an adjustment somewhere along the line. Right?
Right.
It's helpful if you have somebody in your exit team who's seen it 30 times and you're like, oh, yeah, I remember this one. This is where he didn't want to work. He didn't want to sign a non compete for 5 years. It's only 1 year. And right, that is where either investment bankers or exit advisors or CPAs or tax attorneys can really be advantageous for both parties to make sure that everything's on the up and up, makes sure that everybody is on the same page with exactly where we are, and then helping to resolve the differences.
Right, right. And what you touched on, I think, in part of what you just said is really what's called due diligence. It's from the acquirer or from the seller or whomever, but due diligence, making sure that you dot the I's, did you cross the T's? Do you have written processes? Did you really legally create that company 20 years ago with the right documentation and you're in good order with the state? But due diligence has been tended to uncover all that so that when the buyer, the acquirer, does actually acquire the business, nothing surprises them later that they didn't expect because they've done their due diligence along the way.
Yeah, amazing. And that takes a long time because you got to go
Yep.
back over years. Then many times there's outside transactions, many times there's banking relationships, sometimes based on the type of company it is, there's all kinds of differences and changes, and sometimes LLCs will go back to C corporations or B
Yep.
corporations or things like that. And so it all has to be logical. Got to make sure that everybody's paying their taxes. Got to make sure that they're up to speed with all of the filings, legal, state, local,
Yep.
national, and now international, right? And that takes a long time and has to be perfect to finalize a good transaction.
Right, exactly, exactly. And that due diligence also gets to a data room where all that information is collected and exchanged between the buyer and the seller. But that's all, during the transaction. But that all just has to happen. What about? Let me ask you, Dan. Not sure how much you talked about your Tyre Angel and about it looks like acquiring companies? Is that part of, talk about that a little bit. What is the goal with Tire Angel? What is the intention, and what are you looking for in that?
So I'm an entrepreneur, and we support entrepreneurs all across the world, right? In I think it was 2008, 2009, I started a division of HubSpot called HubSpot for Startups. And it was
Okay.
giving HubSpot technology at a 80% discount to scale up companies so that they would start on HubSpot and they'd scale all the way to paying
Okay.
us a lot of money as they got successful. And as part of that, I started advising companies in Phoenix and Boston and New York and San Francisco. And it turns out because I'm a go-to-market guy and because I have lived it multiple times, I'm really good at getting traction and helping companies grow very, very quickly. So as part of that, people would say, I want you to be an advisor. And from the very beginning, I'm like, get three advisors because having scaled my own company, I had three amazing advisors. These guys kicked my ass 4 times a year. I was growing 100% a year. I dropped 20 points of pre-tax income. I was always doing something wrong. And at the time, I'm like, oh my God, would you? They always made me buy dinner. And then they weren't big drinkers, but I had to buy them dinner. And I felt like I'd been through the ringer because I was. They'd be like, okay, right, you got to reduce your costs. You got to get your customers to pay for this. Your expense line is great. And I learned so much. Right. And these guys were Steve Levy was the guy. He was the CEO of Bolt, Brannick and Newman, or BBN, publicly traded company in Cambridge. And he's like, I'm going to teach you how to run a company. I'm going to mentor you. And he's like, the only thing I want in return is I want you to give back when you're rich and successful. And
Oh,
I've
fantastic.
honored that. And it was fantastic. He helped recruit three CEOs of publicly traded companies that I'm on my board of directors. I'm a
That's
million.
amazing.
I'm $1 million company. And these three guys would come in
Wow.
and first of all say, where's the food? And then after I showed them the spread, right? They put up your projection. Okay, this is where you're falling down. Oh my. And they could read a balance sheet and income statement like I could read like a newspaper. Like it was amazing how their eyes would specifically go to, no, you're spending too much here. You're not investing here. Why is your sales productivity so low? Amazing. And so I've always carried that through. I like three advisors for all of our company. And so anyway, I started doing that. And as part of scaling, right, periodically people will have to raise capital. And when you're an advisor to a company, the ultimate investment is that you invest in that company. So Tire
Mm.
Angel invests 25, 50, or $75,000 into these early stage companies. And
Okay.
we've done it 28 times, 23 are still around, and it's worth the total market cap of our 23 companies are about $500 million.
Wow.
And it's all the same thing, right? Number one, we look for a founder that's going to listen and apply. Number two, we're looking for a go-to-market strategy, right? Where first we start with founder-led sales and then we move to the professional sales that you're talking about. Number three, we focus on a competitive advantage or what we call transformation, right? And competitive advantage is the hardest in 2026 because it's got to be a competitive advantage today and also a competitive advantage against AI in 24 months,
Yeah.
right? So if it doesn't pass that sniff test, it's not going to be good. Then
Right.
we look at the total addressable market, which has to be at least $1 billion. We look at the technology, which has to be solid, but is a little less important because you can build almost anything very quickly AI assisted. And then we're trying to get a 10x. We really want a 30x response if it's pre-seed or seed, but in most cases a 10x exit so that we can be a profitable
Okay.
organization
Okay.
continues to grow. And so I do that for half the time. Then as operating a partner for Stage 2 Capital, we look at lots of companies. We're looking at essentially the same thing, but Stage 2 is institutional VC and it's a little bit different kind of niche. At Stage 2, we have 1,000 LPs that feed us deals all the time and then advise our companies and scale up. Tire Angel is pretty much kind of like a family office. It's my
Okay.
own money, but I love helping entrepreneurs scale. You saw
Okay.
that when you and I met down at the Henry,
Yep.
right? It's like I have a passion because number one, it's fun. Number
Right.
two, I'm pretty good at it. Number three, I love to teach the things that I learned. They're a little bit different now. I'm a kind of guy that is a very clear and effective communicator. Okay. When I worked at Walmart, I closed $1 million deal at Walmart in 2004. And Walmart's thing, if you see a snake, shoot a snake, right? Which is Arkansas speak for just do it, right? And I've always had that philosophy. It's like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start a company. Number one, start with the goals and work backwards. Number two, write your plan. I want to see a plan. And if people say, I'll send it to you in a day, that means they don't have a plan. You have to have a plan because that's the only way you know if you're on track. Number three, if it's not written, it doesn't exist. All that stuff that you talked about, right? When you have three people, you can riff it a little bit. As soon as you have five people, or as soon as you want to explain it to advisor, if you don't have the discipline to write it out, especially with AI, you can like just talk into Claude and
Yep,
it'll build it.
exactly.
Then it's not worth my time, right? I don't want to listen to you ramble, and I want to hear you change your mind. I want you to write it out. I want you to say, this is the problem. I just have a newsletter on LinkedIn that talks about the decision process and how you make decisions in this kind of context. But you want to define the decision. You want to define who's impacted. You want to understand what your options are. And then you want to make a recommendation of the option. And then your advisor should be able to look at that, evaluate it, understand your recommendation, and say, okay, that's a reasonable decision, or say, no, if you do that, you're going to have a lot of difficulty down the road. And I have sit on three boards of directors, advise half a dozen companies involved with probably 50 in the Phoenix area because it's so much fun.
Okay, fantastic. When you talked about the three advisors, about your advisors, the CEOs who helped you grow and scale your company, I had to think about it sounded like you were hiring a personal trainer, but these personal trainers were for your company versus your physical health.
That's a great example, right? These guys were the nicest people in the world, except when it came to evaluating my income statement. And then they would be like, I don't understand this. And this is a company that's grown 100% a year for 6 years. Why we're our all-star, the top 2%, Inc. 500, right? Insane. But there was always something wrong. And what I realized, and Halligan says this all the time, Brian Halligan, co-founder of HubSpot, criticism is the breakfast of champions. What I learned, right, is so important because yeah, everything was going great, but one of those things could have unraveled. And I knew all the great stuff that I did. I didn't need people pat me on the back telling me how great it was. What I needed is people who were smart enough to tell me what the real problem was
Uh-huh.
and understood the business model well enough where they can say, okay, watch out for this. And that's extremely, you don't want your friends being advisors. You don't need a friend. You want somebody who's going to grow the business and going to see around corners see things that you can't see to help keep you out of trouble. And that's the way you build these $20 million companies, which are amazing and highly valuable, generational wealth,
Yeah.
super fun, high. You'll feel great when you're employing 50 people and you're signing the paycheck. I There's a local entrepreneur, Tanya Katan, who wrote a book about creative trespassing. And she's a very incredibly creative person. And she interviewed me for the book. And when I started my second company, I used to put on a yellow sticky. First of all, it wasn't direct deposit. Everybody had a check. I know sound like your grandfather, Armando, right? But I used to put a little yellow sticky in everybody's kind of thing. And
Oh.
30 years later, people have pinged me with pictures of the little yellow stickies that I put in people's checks, right? Because talk about a culture, because I was so appreciative of what they were doing. And it was just my little way of thanking them for the extra effort that they put in as the company scaled 100% each of the first 6 years.
Yeah, as a personal touch, a question for you. At times we'll talk with founders, Dan, who they want to they've already achieved a certain level of success and they're at a fork in the road. Do they put their foot in the gas more and grow it more, or do they just exit now? And when you talked about the Tyre Angel and that, it made me think about them. And it really is their decision to make. Do they want to grow and scale and put more gas into the tank, or
Yeah.
are they done? And that
Yeah.
is, up to them to decide. But when you think about that, with your experience, when you think about that fork in the road, what do you think they might want to ask themselves or think about themselves so they can make a decision that really is right for them?
I don't know where I came up with it, but I've always said it takes 8 years to build a great company, right? And that's both the people, the culture, the management team, the direction, the competitive advantage, all that kind of stuff. So I think a good question may be, can I do this for another 8 years?
Mm,
Right? And because everything is changing now, right? And it's going to get a lot harder. I used to have this great slide of a baby lifting a barbell. And the question on the slide in my public presentation was easy or hard to scale a company? And it was a good slide. It's a great slide, actually, and a great question because Some people would say easier, some people harder. Today, the answer is definitive. It is harder to scale a company than ever before because there's more
Mhm.
competition, there's more
Wow.
technologies, and getting traction in an attention-starved world is a huge challenge. So we want people to understand that it's not going to get any easier. If you have a clear competitive advantage like Google or Facebook, that's one thing, right? But everything is going to change. And if you're not committed to going back and starting from the beginning, like putting yourself in disintermediating your competitive advantage, then it may be a time to look at some level of exit. And you know, Armando, it may not be selling the company, maybe it's selling a piece of the company, maybe
Right.
getting some shareholders, maybe taking some money off it, which is why your tax advisors, wealth advisors, CPAs are trusted kind of thing because it doesn't always occur to a first time founder who has 90% of their net worth that everything can be over in 2 weeks, right? That OpenAI announces the new EDU plugin and all of a sudden the 20 million revenue stream. And so, good financial advice is sometimes taking money off the table, and there's a variety of different ways that you may be able to do it in a variety of different settings that reduces your risk and help you achieve your goal.
Yep, exactly. And Dan, what you just said made me think about I've heard many, many, many founders who've already exited as you have, who've said, your business can change overnight. You're doing fantastic today. Great. Well, you might want to think about exiting because what's doing great today might not be doing great tomorrow because of the industry, because of, as you said, maybe AI introduces something that really harms your business.
You always get to decide. I never make decisions unless it's, I think the company or the individual will be at risk because I want them to fall into that pothole. The challenge in your business is this is a big pothole, right? It's an expensive pothole. And like you said, it could be a once in a lifetime pothole.
Yep.
In those situations, there's a board member for HubSpot, Lori Norrington, and she's a big time board member on 10 or 12 publicly traded companies. And she taught me the Lori Norrington decision matrix. And I love it because it's so simple. She's like, it's an easy decision and easy to roll back, you make it. If it's an easy decision but hard to roll back, you make it because it's an easy decision. If it's a hard decision but easy to roll back, you make it just because if you made the wrong mistake, you can roll. If it's a hard decision and hard to roll back, you spend a lot of time. You hire a lot of experts because you can't get it. And that is the business we're talking about. When you're selling your company,
Oh,
it's a hard decision and it's hard to roll back, right? So
exactly.
you want to take all of the people that
Right.
you work on a regular basis. If you don't have them, you call my buddy Armando. He'll find a way that we can
That's
connect you
right.
to the right people because it's just like playing on an all-star team. When you're surrounded with people who've done it 30 times, who know what to look for, who can be your advocate either personally or professionally, it makes all the difference in the world.
Right. Yeah. There are no do-overs in that once in a lifetime sale. There are no do-overs. So it has to be right. And we advocate often and loudly to get that professional exit team on board. Again, that CPA who really understands the buying and selling of businesses, the attorney who is the merger and acquisition attorney, not your litigation lawyer, not your commercial lease lawyer, not your employment lawyer, but the lawyer who understands and specializes in what's called M&A, mergers and acquisitions. But having that entire exit team together, investment banker, wealth advisory, because exit is a specialty and it's often for many mainstream attorneys or tax CPAs, it's just not what they get involved in day to day. So they may get involved, but they really are not the expert in, and you want to have that A team on board, as you said, in her hard decision, hard rollback, you get the experts. That's when you get those experts.
Amazing. And you'll thank yourself for it, right? And hopefully you don't have the situation where you're kicking yourself because you were cheap, right?
Right.
And that you understand we're intentional. And this is what we want to do. That's
Yep.
a very important component in professional life.
Yep, exactly. Let me ask you another question here. When a founder is searching for a buyer, sometimes they have in mind that their competitor across the street is the ideal buyer, and they really don't want to look beyond that one ideal buyer. What are your thoughts on pre-selecting what that buyer should look like as you're thinking about going into exit for your company?
So if you decide that you want to evaluate a potential exit, I'm a big believer in partnering. The best acquisitions and mergers I've ever seen are people who partnered already, so that it's some level of relationship, and you're getting into understanding the people, the mission, the culture, the growth, the way the
Yeah.
company works, right? So I tell all of our portfolio companies, if you want to get acquired, get a short list of potential acquisitions. That's easier in AI as well. There's a
Yep.
variety of different large aggregators in PE, in roll-ups, in
Yep.
individual competitors. The big issue of getting bought by your competitor, unless you're going to take stock, which is a little bit risky, is can your competitor afford you? And if they can, then they should be on the list, right? And there's a variety of different ways. Once again, advisors can help, right? I can go over across the street and say, how well do you know Armando? And they'll be like, I hate that guy. He's my arch competitor. And I'm like, you ever thought about maybe a combination in some fashion? And they're like, ooh, that's kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
And it's unrelated, it's a related party, but just putting something in somebody's. Why don't we try it for a little bit? Let's see if there's ways that we can work together a little bit to see if we're aligned, right? To understand the foundation of a potential acquisition or a merger or something like that. And even if they don't want to go, at least you put the idea in the back of their brain. Okay, they may be for sale. And you're like, no, 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 it's just early stages. We're just understanding all of our options. Sometimes it breaks into the news. Oh, Armando wants to sell his business. And you're like, no, our business is very solid. We got a great competitive advantage. We love our employees, our vendors, our customers. We're just trying to understand what all of our options are. Sometimes they say, I wish Armando would buy me. And you'd be like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Okay,
Right.
maybe.
Right.
And then you can work from there. Just as you understand, the three takeaways I want people to know is this exit is fraught with challenges. So make sure that you're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, which I know is your big thing. I'm stealing your big thing, Armando.
No, no,
That's
no,
what
no,
you've been.
no.
I know.
No. The
Very,
more
very
we
important.
the more we get the message out there, then, what we
Yeah.
want to see is for those American success stories out there who, through blood, sweat, and tears, and just hours and hours and hours of work, where they built this fabulous company that now is worth a lot of money. We want them, you and I, and probably everybody we know wants them to have that successful exit. So we want them to hear they need to dot those I's and cross those T's so they can have that exit that they really want to have. And you mentioned, Dan, a couple of things. You mentioned roll-ups, and some of the terms you might have mentioned, some of the founders might not really know what that means. When you talked about roll-ups, or you mentioned roll-ups, or private equity doing roll-ups, just touch on what does that really mean for a founder who might be listening to our conversation right now?
Sure. So, in every industry, HVAC, installation and support, fencing, everything, there's people with a lot of money that believe that they can acquire smaller companies and add them to a larger infrastructure to give them economies of scale. Because there's centralized accounting, centralized sales, centralized marketing spend, all those kind of things. So roll-ups are a reasonable alternative for an exit. If somebody comes in
Yep.
and you're a dominant player in a local market, right? You can, they have it all aligned in a spreadsheet, but you can run your own numbers to say that you're worth more to them than you are as a standalone business because they could take out some costs and make a higher profit margin and
Yep.
essentially more money. Right?
So it could be 12 plumbing companies all roll up into one where they get, as you said, those economies of scale. And now the value of that one company that used to be 12 independent ones is now even more valuable than the 12 individually would have been.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, roll-ups are one of the ways. For tech companies over the last 10 years, especially early stage tech companies, the goal has been previously to go public, right? That's very, very hard because you got to hit a certain milestone.
Yep.
You have to have a certain growth perspective. And the easy part is going public. The hard part is sustaining and growing your share valuation once you're public because you're under a level of scrutiny that is expensive, takes time, and you have to execute or you get crushed like a bug. And so many times people want to stay private. They'll roll up traditional industries for the economies of scale that you talk about. And it's a great way for a local entrepreneur to exit.
Right, exactly. And it sounds like the companies that you're mentoring now, that you're helping now, are, here local in Arizona, but really they could be anywhere, or probably
We
are
have
anywhere.
a Middle East portfolio company. We have one based in Sweden. It's an AI company providing technology to K through 12. That's Imagi Labs. They just raised $4.5 million so they can scale to education districts in the United States and throughout the world. Uh, Most of them are here in the United States, but what we focus on, my mantra is to do the most good for the universe,
Okay.
right? I want to help entrepreneurs scale. I love it. I want to see these early stage companies grow like a weed. I want to tell them it's going to be hard. I want to coach them to make sure they get there to the extent of my bandwidth. I want to be part of that journey because it's super fun and be part of success. And when you've had my track record, it's not so much about the money, right? Once you get a certain level of wealth, right? I don't need a lot of additional capital, but it's
Yep.
part of the process because you need to have skin in the game.
Yep.
And if you're an owner in the company and an advisor, it's a little different than you're just an advisor in the company.
Right. I love that. Do the most good for the universe.
I know I stole that from my kid, Eli, when he dropped out of University of Chicago, right? He's a super, super kid. Both of my kids, amazingly socially responsible, which I give credit to my wife, Amy Tyre, right? She is the smart Tyre. I'm just a big energy and a good entrepreneur, but I could never have done it without her. And when he dropped out of college, he's like, Dad, all I want to do is the most good for the universe. And I'm like, oh, where did you get that? Whose kid are you? Oh my goodness. So I'm like, I'm stealing that line. He's like, what? I'm like, that's my new mantra. I'm going to do the most good for the universe. He's like, I don't think that's a thing. And I'm like, yes, it is. And so after I've done a lot of stuff in business, now I love to give back. I love to help you on your podcast. I love to help any of your listeners. I like to help companies scale. I like to have a lot of fun. And so thank you very much for inviting me.
No, thank you. And we have we believe in giving back as well, and we have you can't see it, of course, but on my wall in my office here, there's a big poster check about 4 feet long by 2 feet tall, and the check is for $100 million because our goal is that as we help entrepreneurs and founders go through navigate that exit, the founders that we're talking with want to do as your son Eli said, do the most good for the universe. They want to help others. They realize they've been blessed, they've been fortunate, and not a lot of people have that in their lives. But since they in fact have that, and they need to be stewards of the monies that they have, they realize that they want to share with the community and they want to help others along the way. So the check on our wall, on my wall here, is for $100 million because we're helping those founders navigate exit. And there are a lot of, being a former tax CPA back in the day, there are lots of tax strategies out there that are also wealth management strategies, that are also estate planning strategies and wealth transfer strategies that come into play perfectly for that founder who has created millions of dollars of wealth in a company, and now they want to do good things in the universe. We can help them do that and help them reduce their tax bill and help them preserve their assets, all by strategies that we have that we bring onto the table. So our goal, we haven't hit the $100 million yet, but we're getting certainly close now. And that's on the wall to help remind us the good that we're helping by helping our founders navigate exit.
Yeah, when I'm teaching people go to market, right? The foundation of today's modern sales or growth process is always be helping, right? We call sales people shelpers, sales helpers, right? Because no one needs to be sold, and you haven't been pushed in by a pushy salesperson in 20 years,
Sure.
right? But if somebody calls up and says, "No, Armando, I help people get 1,000 new listeners to my podcast, and I wanted to talk to you a little bit about how we could help you on that scale," you'd be like, "Excuse me? Oh my goodness." And so it's not that hard to understand what the value is for your listeners, right? If you're contemplating an exit anytime in the next 3 years, you'll do a 30-minute consultation, right?
Right,
Armando?
exactly.
Yeah, you'll
Exactly.
jump out of you collared me at the Henry, and you're like, Dan, I just want to talk. And very, very professional, and like great, and offered, say, like, if I can be of service, let me know. And that's the essence of every business is a people business. You're just trying to help people, and sooner
Exactly.
or later, people say, okay, not not only do I need your help, but I need your help now, and I'm willing to pay for it.
Fantastic, fantastic. I want to touch on a couple things that as we're wrapping up here on a few things that you said, and I'll just recap. You said, be intentional what you want. Write down your goals. If it's not written down, it's not really a goal. You said really there's a mantra, it takes 8 years to build a business. So if that founder's thinking about either exiting or maybe sticking in there and building the company, they probably want to plan on 8 years to do that. You said to focus on priorities priorities. I love the acronym that you mentioned as well, the HEART. And I'm going to ask you again to talk about what that acronym means, if you don't mind, because I don't want to screw it up on my end over here. But that acronym HEART for the corporate culture, please, again, what does that acronym stand for?
Sure. So this is HubSpot. Dharmesh Shah, who's co-founder, right? What we wanted to do is make sure that everybody understood, number one, culture was important. Number two, at HubSpot, we're going to take it seriously. Number three, any employee that worked for HubSpot, right, needed to abide by these rules.
Mhm.
Heart stands for H is humble, right?
Okay.
And like in today's modern world, there's no room for big egos. Anybody who's ever worked with a big ego person where the people roll their eyes as soon as he comes in the room understands why that's important. E, it used to be effing effective. That means people who are top performers, but then changed to empathy, right? And Katie made that move because as we got a larger, more diverse employee group, we wanted to make sure that everybody understood where sales and marketing was coming from, technology was coming from. So E was effing effective or empathy. A is
Okay.
adaptability,
Yep.
right? Which should be in everybody's acronym. You make your own acronym, right? Or you can take that heart from HubSpot. It's in the public domain. A is adaptable, which is perfect for the
Yep.
modern era. R is remarkable, right? Where you're going to do remarkable stuff. And if you're not a remarkable person, then you're not going to be good in the HubSpot. And T is transparent. So
Okay,
HEART,
fantastic.
heart. And then just Google HubSpot culture code, right? And you'll see there's 100, it used to be 127 slides. Now there's 147 slides because they have the next level of drill down. And there's so many good ideas. And everywhere I go to talk about scale, we always talk about the HubSpot culture code because it's such a good idea, so well implemented, and one of the reasons the company scaled so well.
Okay, good. And you also mentioned having, you want to make sure that every company has three good advisors, three
Yes.
three people that are telling them not what they're doing right, but where's the room for improvement. And as you said, these what you had, they beat you, but they help you build and scale.
100%. If you have more than three employees, it's time for you to get an advisor, right? And what you really want to do is get people who are complementary to your expertise, right? I like a go-to-market advisor, at least one. I like somebody who's a technology advisor who could advise in the scale of technology and somebody who really understands the industry. But an advisor has to know your business. They have to know your business well enough where they understand the pace, they understand the balance sheet, they understand your cash needs, they understand and the growth trajectory, and can help you see around corners.
Okay, fantastic, fantastic. And so Dan, as we're about wrapping up here, the again, our listener, our audience is that founder got one company, they've built it from scratch, and they're wondering about exit, thinking about exit, not knowing how to exit. They've not navigated this before. You've done this several times, been through a couple of very successful unicorns, as you said in the past, and now you're helping entrepreneurs grow and scale with your Tyre Angel group. What would be some final thoughts you might want to share with these founders who are right now thinking about that upcoming exit? Maybe they haven't started to pull the trigger yet, but they're thinking about it. What would you like to share with them, given your experience?
Get your thoughts on paper. Talk to the people who are in your inner circle, right? Get plenty of runway, right? And call Armando. All right. Thank you so much for inviting me on the
Fantastic.
podcast. I knew we were going to go over an hour. I knew it. You're going to edit it, but like it's still going to be a little. And great subject matter. If I could be of service in the future, you know how to get a hold of me.
Fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much. Really appreciate
Woo!
it.